I'm Tara from Marathon Mates. In this episode, we are going to be doing a very special recap of the Berlin and Chicago marathons. You'll hear us talk about our experiences on the day, as well as the race itself. Are you ready to run? Let's go.
Welcome to the thrilling world of the Flying RuNR, brought to you by the Marathon Mates.
Welcome back to the Flying RuNR for this very special episode. We will give you a rundown of our experiences in Berlin, as well as Tony providing a rundown of his experiences in Chicago. But before we talk about these marathons, welcome back home, Tim and Tony. How's things? And most importantly, how are we all coping with the post-marathon blues?
Well, I'll let Tim go first, shall we?
Oh, well, I'm all pretty good. I guess we got back a bit over a week and a half or so ago now, and I guess we've got back into the mundane world that we are in normally, which is waking up, going for a run, going to work, coming home, eating right, drinking right, stretching, all those sort of things. So probably back into there. I've got a bit of post-marathon blues, I think.
Had a lot of FOMO watching you at Chicago.
Yeah.
How are you feeling?
Well, we got back on Wednesday, so we flew out of Chicago Monday afternoon, then went to LA and flew out of there at like 11 o'clock at night. So arrived Wednesday morning and was back at work today. So there hasn't been too much downtime whatsoever. Yeah. Feeling a bit weary at work and needless to say, it was a pleasure to actually get home and have a quick shower and freshen up and then have a bit of a chat. So hopefully back to normal tomorrow. We've got the Bridge to Brisbane on Sunday. We're running that with our son. So we haven't run since Chicago. So that'll probably be our first run, to be honest. But I don't have any post-marathon blues. So.
Not ready to run another one yet?
No, we'll keep that up the sleeve till we do Tokyo next year. So
I've got the blues big time. I miss that big crowd atmosphere and the travel, and I think it's so far to the next one. And we'll talk about the next one later on in this episode. But I think that's probably what it is. The next event is so far away.
I think because we were watching everybody do Chicago straight after Berlin as well, and we're like, oh, we want to be there. So,
we've got New York as well coming up, and a few people doing New York. So, it's always that time of year where it's the end of our running season, and it's a bit of a gap till the next running season and the races. But you just got to keep motivated and keep plodding along, and the days become weeks, and the weeks become months, and before you know it, you're into your final couple of weeks before you taper. So, we'll get there, but we've all detoxed as well. I guess we drank an awful lot of alcohol and we ate a lot of food while we're away, and we've now gone through that sort of detox. So we're back sleeping well. We're back into our normal routines and rhythms. So
and ultimately, what I came to realize doing Chicago is you can't do every major every year. And you're always going to have those situations where you're watching someone else do something. Yeah. And I think you two are especially, you get so much joy out of seeing other people succeed and do what it is that they do so well. And I think that's just something that holds us all together. We know the feeling, we know the experience, but we also love that other people are experiencing and seeing that joy. So, we can't do everything. I'm going to miss not doing New York this year. I can't wait to do it next year. We did New York in 2018, and that is still one of the best ever feelings that I've had. So, but you can't do it every year. You can't do every major every year. You'd be broke. So.
And you'd have very sore legs.
Yeah, that's 6 marathons a year. And the travel, no, it'd be great though. And I think when we had Terry Frew on, he talked about that low he went through after he achieved his 6-star status because he didn't have something to aim for. And that's one thing that's on my mind. Once we achieve our 6, what is that next thing? Because they are addictive, and because these big races are, the adrenaline goes, you look forward to them so much beforehand. It's about, I guess, trying to find that next challenge, something that will challenge us to keep motivated and keep moving forward.
Well, Tracy McKay was part of the Travelling Fit group this year from New Zealand, and she does ultras, and it's almost like that's her next stage. And it was really interesting talking with her about, her journey through the 6 stars. She picked up a 6-star at Chicago, and she was looking forward to becoming the second Kiwi to come and talk about her 6-star story on the podcast. But she does ultras, so she's already thinking ahead. She's, there was a lot of talk there on the celebration event at Chicago about comrades and in South Africa, and 7 continents, I think, is on her agenda now. And, it's just incredible how people just kick off their goals and then say, okay, what's next? And it's going to be interesting when we kick ours 6-star, because, I've openly said that I'm quite happy never to run another marathon again. But it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting.
That's it.
Absolutely. So I guess, should we talk about the Berlin Marathon first, and then we'll go on to Chicago? But Berlin.
Yes. And
oh, you got the medal.
Oh, there we go. There's the medal. Yes.
I got one of them.
So for those that can't see us, Tony is holding up the medal from the Berlin Marathon. So if you go onto YouTube, you'll be able to see that. Or Spotify.
Yep.
Spotify show as well. With the Berlin Expo, let's start there, I guess, because that's where the race really starts for us all, isn't it? What did you think, Tony, the Expo?
I think it's tonight's episode is a really exciting one for me, and I know for both of you, in not just for our experiences, but I think over that fortnight we witnessed 4 of the most amazing, incredible human endurance success stories that we like. I am still flabbergasted at what the elites did in both Berlin and Chicago. So yes, our experience is part of that. And I was asked today at work, how'd you go? And I said, well, they had to make a world record to beat me. So so it does feel really, really cool to have been part of that. But our experiences from Berlin were generally positive, I think. So the expo to me was unique. But I still feel that there's just something missing with expos. And I actually thought about it today in much greater depth and clarity. And I think that Chicago, like, I don't want to sort of go off track here either, but I think what we need to see at expos are things like a tech zone where you've got all your smart watches, your power striders, your earbuds, whatever's tech. There's a tech zone, then there's a shoe zone, then there's a sports apparel zone, then there's a nutrition zone, so that you can actually spend time in a zone trying to pick up some of those best things. So, but that's what I think expos are missing. And I'm not an expert expo person at all, but from a person who attends expos, I think I'd like that. But I liked Berlin. It was in a unique experience. I thought their registration process and the way that you got your bibs and your finisher shirts was very well organized. There was no major drama there. I thought their crowd control they had a really crowded area where all the majors were there, the Adidas of the world and their major sponsors. And that was like bedlam to me. And there was no crowd control. And then they had a much quieter area where some of their lesser exhibitors were. So I just think you've got to find the balance. But I thought the expo generally was probably one of the better ones that I've been to, although that there were still some hiccups that I thought.
It was a very interesting expo because they had the inline skating at the same time as the marathon. So we had a lot of inline skating stuff inside the actual they call it the Flughafen, which is the airport, the old Tempelhof Flughafen.
Yeah.
It's the old airport that I don't think ever got used, or maybe, I don't know.
It got used.
It got used, yeah. Anyway, it isn't in use now. But on the runways and out on the concourse, they had big tents and stuff like that. So I feel like I sort of missed some of it. The part inside the airport was the major part, you know, where you pick up your bibs and stuff, and the apparel, you know, the merchandise. But there was stuff outside, and I think a lot of that was
inline skating.
Inline skating,
Yeah.
but I think there may have been running stuff out there as well that I may have missed, and I just got lost
Yeah.
in it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I didn't actually look in all those things. So
Yeah.
I think what I sort of expect with a lot of those expos, and they're largely becoming the same. I agree with you, Tony. You walk straight in and you're hit by a wall of major sponsor, and they have every right to be there. They pay a lot of money to be there, but major sponsor merchandise is up front as soon as you walk in. And it's the same with London. It's the same with Tokyo. And everyone's going hell for leather to grab everything they can possibly grab off the shelves. And then you sort of move beyond that, and you're sort of exhausted just dealing with that first up. And then you go beyond that and you're into this other area of all these other stalls. And I guess from my point of view, what I go to is I'm looking for that unique thing that I probably haven't seen before. And I didn't really see anything in Berlin that was new or exciting to me. I was thinking, here I am. I'm an Australian in Europe. There's going to be a whole heap of Europe, unique Europe brand, a whole heap of unique Europe merchandise. And maybe it's the world we live in. It's all globalized now, but it was largely the big brands that you would see everywhere else on most other expos. I didn't really see a lot of the local stuff, and nothing that was different or new or something that made me want to dig my hands into my pocket and go, oh, geez, I need to have that. Or it might also be a combination of got everything I need when I run, and I've got used to certain brands and used to certain bits of gear that I'm comfortable with running, that I don't need to spend time looking at all those other products. And maybe there's a combination of that as well.
You don't the inline skates though at normal expos.
No.
So you've got to admit, do you get the 4-wheel skate or the 3-wheel skate? There was something new for you.
Yeah, but I agree with you. Maybe some sort of a tech zone would be handy. That's what I was sort of looking at. Is there is some sort of a watch or set of glasses or headphones or something that I haven't seen in the market here in Australia? But largely, you know, they had aftershocks there where you can get them here. You got, you know, you got sunglasses which you can get back home or whatever, and they're all largely the same products. There was nothing that made me go, this is different, this is unique. And that's probably where I got to a point with it was like, I've seen all this, let's just move on. I've got my bib, I've got my little armband, I've got my merchandise that says finisher or whatever. I've got your jacket or whatever. The only thing I missed out on was a hat because they sold out of them pretty quick. But yeah, I probably, it was a good expo, don't get me wrong. It's just not something that I would probably go back to over and over and over again and spend every day there.
Yeah, agreed.
So Friday night, we all went to the Hall of Fame, the Marathon Hall of Fame. And that was just at the Brandenburg Gates. And we got to see the inductees of the marathon, of all the Berlin Marathon inductees. And, of course, we saw our favourite runner of all time, Eliud Kipchoge. So,
I'm not sure it's our favourite. I think Tony's got a favourite that won in Chicago on the women's side. I think that's his favourite runner.
Yes.
But we did see Kipchoge, and it was very special.
Yeah.
I think Kipchoge's just got such a presence, and he's fundamentally changed the face of marathon running. Everyone knows Kipchoge. So whereas if you go beyond him, maybe 10 years ago, who was the world champ, who had the world record, you'd probably have to go searching, whereas everyone just knows it was Kipchoge. So yeah.
No, that was pretty special though, standing there as the sun's setting down, and I don't know, there's probably a crowd of 2,000 or 3,000 people there, maybe a bit more, just standing there outside. Everyone's happy, and anytime they showed a video of Kipchoge up on the screen, everyone cheered and was getting excited and had a really good vibe. And shout out to our friends Paula and Andrew who were on the tour with us from Traveling Fit. They were literally about 2 meters away from him, had front row seats. Almost could reach out and touch his hands. So when he was reaching out, so it was pretty special to see that.
So after that one, I guess we all went to bed Oh no, we probably didn't go to bed early. We were probably drinking.
Yeah, we drank a few beers.
But anyway, we got up the next morning and we all ran. You did a different run to us though, Tony. Tell us about your run.
Yeah, you guys did the breakfast run, wasn't it? Whereas Sharon and I popped out to see Chris Ford, who runs 40 Runs community in the UK and who does the Long Run podcast, and got a lot of time for Chris, and very, very energetic, very enthusiastic, very personable. What you see on the podcast is what you get. And he was just blown away by the fact that 2 Aussies had traveled 30 hours around the world to attend his shakeout run. So that's what he told us anyway. But he knew that we were there for the marathon. But yeah, they like what the 40 Runs community has been able to do in the UK is just incredible. They're the UK's largest running community group now, and as in running club. End of story. And it's just incredible how they've been able to bring the everyday runner together in what they call their satellites, and to see 30 of them travel from the UK to Berlin. But then also there was a dozen of them from the community that traveled to do Chicago. So it's just phenomenal what Chris Ford is doing with the 40 Runs community. And it was a real pleasure to be involved and to meet him and have a chat. And, he's such a nerd when it comes to shoes. He's walking around, he's saying, Saucony Tempest, you've got the Asics Meta Speed. And like, it's not even getting in close to have a look. He just knows the shoes. And really, it was a good event. But
and then runs Berlin in a pair of Skechers.
Yeah, go ride 11s or whatever. So. But he is sponsored by Skechers, so I think if ever we get sponsored by anything, I think we'll be running in them too.
Yeah, well, we did the breakfast run, so this is sort of an unofficial. It's an official, unofficial, or untimed event that they do,
and it's open to everyone in Berlin. It's not just the marathon runners, so anyone is welcome to run this. So we started at Charlottenburg Palace, and that was really, really amazing. Like and I think they found, out of the flattest city in the world, they found the hilliest parts for us to run on. I thought Berlin was flat. It was really good. It was a really nice run. We finished at the Olympic Stadium and got to see the rings and everything like that. So that was pretty cool.
That was pretty cool.
And then they put on a nice breakfast for us afterwards.
Yeah,
so I got to run around the track that Usain Bolt.
Yeah, so Usain Bolt set the 100-meter world record, the current 100-meter world record in that stadium, and it's also the same stadium that Jesse Owens gave the big EFO to Adolf Hitler in the 1936 Olympics. So what a historic stadium to run through, and it's still got that. It's still the original exterior facades on the stadium, so it's all stone block. It looks very similar in architecture to the airport that we went to. It's Nazi era architecture at its best, I guess. But 9,000 runners, about 9,000 runners attended that run, and it was a really good one. It was no time, just run at your own pace, and people are stopping and taking photos, and it was just a really good, happy vibe about it. So a day before a marathon, it's a nice little shakeout run. Everyone gets really happy and excited, and it's not about pushing hard or trying to tear muscles. It's just about enjoying the moment.
I had a good breakfast afterwards. They put on croissants and bagels and donuts and apples, you name it, all the fruit, all the water, poppers. Yeah, it was good. Yeah, so we did that. Saturday.
Yes.
So Saturday afternoon, Tim and I went for a bike ride around Berlin, because everyone does that before a marathon. Got to watch the inline skaters finish. They were really, really fast. It was good.
They're amazing.
Yeah.
Those inline skaters, I don't know if anyone's seen them before, but they are amazing. They all tuck in behind each other and they snake all over the road. And they're flying. The winner of the inline skating did the full marathon course in 57 minutes. So he's going at about 45 kilometers an hour, thereabouts.
It's unbelievable, and a fun little thing that I found out, and I would call it a fun little fact, but I'm not sure if it's a fact. But they have a thing called skate then run. So if you sign up to do the inline skating marathon 1 year, the next year you get automatic entry into the marathon.
Oh wow!
So if you now, once again, I wish I could say that's a fact. I've only heard that,
No, I've heard
and
the
I
same
saw it.
thing. Yep.
So if you are struggling to get into the Berlin Marathon, sign up as an inline skater and do it.
Well, just in the inline skating event, just looking at the numbers, there was 4,500 inline skaters, which is huge. Yeah.
So now that we've told them that, there'll be 6,000 next year.
No, you're underestimating our listener numbers, Tony.
So we all did a carbo load dinner on Saturday night, which was great. We did some Facebook Lives as well. So we did a Facebook Live at that carbo load dinner. Tony has actually put all of our Facebook Lives that we have done as a podcast. You put it together as a podcast, haven't you? Yep.
Episode 14, and we spoke to young Hayley there from the IMP.
Yep.
And it's going to be awesome to get her on the show one of these episodes, because what a little pocket rocket she is.
I haven't found out if she's done the shoey that she promised she would do.
Yeah.
She missed her time, didn't she? She said, because she did say
had to be a certain time. Yes, that's right.
And she didn't tell us what the time is.
No.
But anyway, she's a pocket rocket, and I can't wait to speak with her. She's a legend.
We'll get her on later on in the year, I think.
So Sunday morning, we all got up, did our photos with Travelling Fit, as we always do. You guys stayed behind at the hotel for a little bit longer, just to hang around and do that. Tim and I walked down to the start line with Travelling Fit, and then I got to the start line and realised I'd forgotten my phone. So we walk back to the hotel, find you guys, and walk back again.
And thank God, because I thought you guys had already been down there, so you knew where to go. So if there's any criticism on my part of the Berlin Marathon, it's probably I thought the start area wasn't as well signed as what it could have been. But that was interesting. Thank God we were staying close to the start line.
Yes, I know, right? Can't do that one when I go to one of those ones that you get dropped in and then have to run back. So
Bluetooth to music into my music and listen to my music.
Oh no.
But the race itself, the start area was fantastic. Once we got into our corrals, I thought the entertainment beforehand was pretty good. The coverage on the screens was pretty good.
Lots of portaloos. So once you're in your corral, you can easily duck off to get a portaloo and then come back out again, get your spot again. It was really well organised that way. Others like Tokyo, where once you're in your corral, that's it, and you can't move and you don't get a toilet again. So that's not much fun.
The interesting thing I heard about the portaloos, and once again, this was not necessarily in our corrals, but some of the ones further up, closer to, I think the 1s and 2s sort of a scenario, waves. There was some criticism around portaloos, and because when I heard that, I'm thinking, well, we had no issues, ours were just there, and but there were stories, and once again I can't substantiate the stories, but I've heard stories from some of the people on YouTube that people were doing like number 1s and number 2s in the bushes, right?
Wow.
And it was in the faster corrals, so maybe they look after us slower corrals a little bit better than what they do the faster ones, or that they're just so stressed that they can't be bothered lining up. So I thought if that was the case, that's probably something I wouldn't want to walk past, seeing someone down on having a squat. So if that's true, that's not great, but I didn't see that at all. We our toilet queues were quite well managed and well maintained. So
and even on course, I think we found the first one about 3Ks, and they seem to be every 2 or 3 Ks they're on in. So
yeah,
for somebody who is me, who does a nervous wee every 3 minutes up until they've nothing left, it works well. So
yeah.
So the aid stations, the first aid station was fantastic for us. It had these reusable cups that were like hard plastic, and you throw them in the bins and you could reuse them again, like the Tupperware type cups. And I'm like, oh, this is fantastic. Got to the next drink station and they're all plastic, soft plastic that aren't they're recyclable, but they're not really reusable. And they were getting underfoot a lot, and especially by the time you hit 30, 40 Ks. I don't know about you, but you were hearing the crunch and the shuffle of plastic cups a lot there.
Yeah, I thought that every now and again, just from out of nowhere, like you might have passed an aid station, say 2 Ks down the track, and then all of a sudden you're kicking a plastic cup out from under your feet, and you're going, where'd that come from? So, I found it interesting because the 5K event at Chicago had reusable, recyclable plastic cups, and they were like a bendable one. And like I found the ones in Berlin were like a rigid one.
Yeah.
And so people were just treating them as a throwaway. But because these ones in Chicago were a bit more flexible, and it was very well signposted what to do with them, and it was only a 5K event, so there was only one drink station, people were very respectful as to where they seemed to go. I thought the plastic cups was an interesting decision. And I don't know how many of those would have been able to be recycled at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But the aid stations themselves are fantastic.
Lots
of water, lots of food. So they had, I think, the first one was at 5 Ks, and then they sort of were at 3 K intervals for the next up until about 30 odd Ks, and then they sort of went to about 2 K intervals for the aid stations. But every second or third station had not only just had water, it had Morton hydration liquid. And then it was like every maybe every fourth or fifth drink station also had fruit on it. So you had bananas, you had apples, and tea as well. So I didn't try the tea. I had nothing new on race day. But, it was handy to have the bananas there because it's something you really love and need when you run. But I thought the aid stations themselves were pretty good. Bit disappointing. There was I think it was about 27 Ks. There was a Morton gel station where we were all meant to get gels. By the time we got there, the gels had run out. There was none there, and all we got was a sticky road for about 1.5 kilometres where everyone dropped their gel packets on the road, and they got really sticky. And all you heard was people's feet sticking to the road. But that was all pretty good. The race itself, how did your race go, Tony?
Yeah, we I made mention the night before I was a little bit nervous, and I thought that I was in really good shape coming into both marathons, and Berlin was going really, really well for me. My story at Boston, of course, was that at the 18K mark, I cramped up incredibly badly, like I've never cramped before. And I don't have fond memories of Boston from that. So at Berlin, when I was hitting that 18K mark, I was nervous, but hopeful. And so I came through the 18K, and as we moved into the 19, I said, yes, we've beaten the bogeyman. And only for Sharon to turn around and say, my calves are cramping up like they've never cramped before. So whatever I had in Boston, she got in Berlin. So at the end of the day, we ended with a 5 in front of us, which is what we're aiming for. The first 3 majors we did all were in the 6s. London was just in the 6s, but they're all in the 6s. So we had a 5 in front of us, which I'm in awe of Sharon and how she managed to continue to run as much as what she did from 19K on. So it wasn't pretty. She said some pretty nasty things to me during that particular race. But by the same token, she did such an amazing job, and I'm in awe. So, but yeah, I I felt really good, and I felt really good at the end. And it was just we could never sink our runs up.
But we'll hear some more shortly on the other one. Tara, what were your thoughts on the run?
Yeah, I loved it. It was fantastic. Everyone goes on about these flat courses and how good they are. Look, yeah, they're fast, but my hips aren't used to running on a flat course. There's no camphor on the road. There's no change of surface. So you're constantly running at one speed, and
no, there's a hill just here. Remember, at 30 k's. Pointing to my shirt, which has got the course profile, which seems to be elongated on the vertical side.
It does seem to be a much bigger hill than what we actually experienced.
That hill does not exist. I can't even remember that hill.
There may have been like a slight incline if we were pushing it. I like flat runs, but for about half an hour after when I finished, I'm just like, oh my God, I'm not used to having these painful hips. So it was a little bit of a surprise for me. Yes, it is a fast course though. Look, I knocked 18 minutes off my majors times. Was it 18 minutes?
18 minutes.
18 minutes. So I'm knocked 18 minutes off my fastest major. So it's obviously a very fast course. It's a great course. I love the crowd support. The crowds are amazing. I cannot fault the crowds in any way. Everybody was out there cheering. Everyone was happy. I don't know about you, Tony, what it was like running, if they were still as enthusiastic.
The crowd surprised me, to be honest, because I almost half expected them to be very conservative, but they were really cool. As in every major marathon, you always have those dickheads that want to cross in front of runners. And we had a couple of those. There was one who was wheeling his scooter across and decided to stop halfway across the road for
I had a lady on a bike do the same thing.
So you always get those people, and they're the ones that stand out. But the crowds were amazing, and we had our first names on the bib, which I found interesting, because if I knew that, I've never really been called Anthony. So to have Anthony called out, but yeah, I thought the crowds were great. The crowds are amazing, especially those last couple of kilometres. And as you're moving into the Brandenburg Gates, that was just one of the best experiences I've ever had running a marathon. And it's just when you really, really need it too. It's just you're coming up through the gates. The crowds are enormous. You've got young Haley from IMP yahooing and cheering you across the line. And we heard her before we saw her. And so crowds are great. So
and the Mexicans on course, I don't know if there was multiple Mexican supporters or if they just kept moving around the course. They were the loudest supporters I've ever heard. I loved it. I loved listening to them. They were just amazing. The Mexican supporters were just on fire. They were just so good. So
I love
really good.
Love the course.
The medal. What do we think of the medal?
It's a medal.
It's a medal.
I'm never ever going to criticize a medal that we get for doing what we do, and it was. At least they had them. That's always a bonus. But the medal was lovely.
It's not the fanciest of fancy medals, but it's very German-like. It's effective, it's efficient, and it does what it's designed to do. It's as you said,
it's a major medal. Everyone knows it's a major medal. When it hangs up on the wall, it stands out. So
that's right.
It does the job. And they look good when you're walking around afterwards around town. Everyone wore it.
Speaking of afterwards, post-race, what do we all do?
Drinks back at the hotel.
Do we remember after the race?
Yeah, no, there was drinks back at the hotel and canapes.
Canapes is
canapes as Michael calls them.
And a few of us, some of those went to bed after that or halfway through that function, and then others, like Tara and I, went out for a few more drinks, and probably midnight or so by the time we got home. I think it was 11:50 something. I think when we got home.
11:57.
Yep, there you go.
Yeah, and deservedly so. You need to celebrate after marathons, and
well, we didn't have another one to do like you did, so yeah.
But it was good. But are we going to look at some of the elites and what they did?
Yeah, absolutely. So with the men, obviously Iliad won. Who else wins Berlin? He did it in 2:02:42, so that's not his fastest time there. But
let's just say this: 2:02:42 is still the 8th fastest marathon time ever.
Yeah.
So it's a fast time. When I watched the race afterwards, he ran. His paces let him down. I felt they didn't hold a good pace to begin with, and they were struggling from about 20 kilometers onwards, and you could tell they were starting to struggle. A few of them dropped out before 25 Ks, and then there was one left there. And I felt that if he had a decent pacing team that lasted to at least 30, and there was 3 of them pushing at a nice consistent pace for 30 Ks or a little bit more, he probably would have run faster.
He seemed to get faster once the paces left him
for a while, and then he sort of cruised back off. But he was under world record pace for the first half.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I did some comparisons of the 5K splits between Elliot and what Kipton ran.
Yep.
And so at the 5K mark, and just, I know we're going to talk about Chicago in a sec, but Elliot did the first 5K in 14 minutes, 0.12, 14.12. Kipton was at 14.26. At the 10K mark, Elliot was 28.27 and Kipton was 28.26. So at the halfway mark, and this is what you were talking about, Elliot was 1 hour and 22 seconds. Kipton was at 1 hour 48 seconds. So Elliot's got the slight lead.
Yeah.
At the 30K mark, Elliot's at 1:26.25. Kipton's at 1:26.31. So at the 30K mark, Elliot's still got that. And then as those paces dropped off, and let's give Kipton some credit because his paces, he left his paces at
well and truly before that.
At the 40K mark, Elliot was 1:56.06 and Kipton was at 1:54.23.
Wow.
So that was the big difference where Kipton just powered through, and then obviously for Kipton to go 2 hours and 30 seconds is just phenomenal. So, but very interesting splits.
Yeah,
there is a 17-year age difference between them as well.
And I don't know. Sorry,
I can't wait to see them race because at the moment it's almost like they're just going for a time. It's just bang. I'm just going to be as fast as I can. But I'd love to see those two race, and hopefully we get the chance at the Olympics because then you start to see tactics and strategy and little bursts here, there. There's no paces there, and but very interesting.
I'm looking forward to it. The other thing to note there, and we didn't get the names, unfortunately. I'll have to dig up the names, but the guy who came second and the guy who came third were newbies to the sport, and both ran phenomenal times, 2:04s or 2:03s, I think, from memory. No, they're actually 2:03s because they're only about 30 seconds or so behind Kipchoge. And again, for first-time marathon runners, they ran phenomenally well and actually did a bloody good job. So I think they're people we need to watch for the future. But I think the big story out of Berlin was Tigist Assefa, who is the world record holder now in the women's marathon. And not only did she break the world record, she obliterated it.
It was a 3 minute, 4 minutes?
Yeah, 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
2.5 minutes or so off the world record. So she has just smashed it. But she had somebody who paced her really, really well. And when you watch the race again, she had somebody who was obviously a very fast runner in his own right, but he stuck with her the whole way through, guided her through that course. helped her avoid a lot of the crowds along the way from the other men in the race, and kept her on track and kept her on pace. But she had this phenomenal kick as well over the last sort of 10Ks or so, where she just seemed to get quicker and quicker.
Yeah. And once again, once we talk Chicago, I'll talk about some of those splits because it's really evident today. So the two that came second was Vincent Kipkemo from Kenya at 2:03.13. And this is 2023. And then third was Tadisi Takili from Ethiopia at 2:03.24.
Yeah.
So just the elites. It's interesting, first marathons, and they're doing that sort of times. Like marathon running is changing forever, and there's a lot of discussion around shoes. So when you look at Asefa's time of 2:11, her nearest component was Sheila Chepkiru at 2:17. So she beat the second place by 6 minutes, and wearing a pair of the new Adidas super shoe that are like $700 if you want to buy a pair here in Australia. So,
but you can only race them. You can only race in them once, and then you have to throw them away.
Yeah. So there's a lot of talk now about, is it the shoe or is it the athlete? And I think that's a shame that's part of the conversation. I just think we're seeing an amazing group of athletes coming through at the moment that are just phenomenal. So, and
I can tell you this much: you can put that shoe on me, and I'm not going to be running that much faster. The shoe helps, but I don't think it's helping as much as what is coming out at.
What I think the difference is yes, there's shoes, and the shoes helping with recovery, and it's changing the way they train. I think what's happening is these runners have seen Kipchoge go from the track as a 5 and a 10K runner on the track onto the roads. Now, road running is a lot more lucrative than track running as far as endorsements and sponsorships and prize money that goes into those events.
Yeah.
You couldn't tell me who won the 5,000 meters at the World Championships in the men's, or who won the 10,000, but you can tell me who won the majors over the last couple of majors this year, right? In the marathons. And I think what's happening is those people that were running 5 and 10s regularly on the track and were competing at that level have taken that track training and that track mentality and the track racing techniques and bringing that out onto the road, because they've seen Kipchoge go down that path. And I know marathoners, many of them were good 10,000 meter runners, but they sort of moved from 10,000 very early in their career into the road, whereas it seems now a lot of these runners are on the 5 and 10 on the track and then doing that for a while and then working their way up to a marathon. And a lot of these guys, that's what they've done. And I think you're seeing a change in training, a change in mentality, a change in racing because of that background they're coming from.
Maybe. Yeah. It could be the fact that there was 47,912 runners pushing the person in front along too. So
that was us.
It took a world record to beat you at Berlin.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk Chicago, shall we?
Yes, absolutely. How was the expo?
Yes, well, first up, let's just quickly talk about the travel. I was actually really surprised how much the travel knocked me around, to be honest. So
it's as far from Berlin to Chicago as what it is from Australia to Berlin, isn't it? Like in travel time, not
for some reason. I was expecting the journey. So we went from Berlin to Helsinki and then Helsinki to Chicago. And for some reason, I was thinking it was like a 6-hour flight. But it wasn't. So it knocked us, and for somewhere along the line, whether it was Berlin or whether it was Munich, we picked up a tickle in the throat, which was killing us. Right, throats were sore, we were coughing, and then we had pretty much a large day out traveling. So the one piece of advice I will give anyone, if they say be at the airport 3 hours early, make sure you are at the airport 3 hours early. We got there 2.5 hours early, and the stress while we were waiting for someone who wasn't as urgent as us process us was really quite challenging. So, and once again, when you're stressed, there's energy that you're putting out that you don't that is better
Burning
off. So
unnecessary. Yeah.
so the travel wasn't great, and then of course we had quite an extended time in Chicago, which allowed us to get over the tickle in the throat, allowed us to get some runs in, allowed us to get around and walk and spend a lot of time on our legs, which was fantastic. Expo itself was really good. It was in a down near Soldier Field Stadium on the waterfront. It was a designed expo center, so it was like the traditional sort of convention centers. Once again, very easy to get in, get your bib, go to the back of the expo to pick up your participant shirt, etc., etc. We picked up our 5K bibs there as well, and our 5K bobble hat, or what they call a bobble hat. We just call it a beanie. So Expo was very well organized. Once again, just missing that little bit. We'd already bought our participant gear because we were close to the Nike shop where we were staying, so we were able to get our jackets without having to fight people as they were trying to take them off the racks. So we got them early, so we had no dramas there. There was no stress. But once again, really well organized, a lot of exhibitors, but at the end of the day, I just felt like it's still just lacking something. And, maybe who knows what happens with expos moving forward. But one of the best experiences, I talk about Boston Expo being really shit. Poor. But Boston has this concept of pop-up shops that aren't far from the expo. It's down one of the main streets, and the vibe and what you get in those pop-up shops with stuff happening all the time is what I'd sort of expect or want to see in an expo, So I think Boston do the pop-up shops well, although I don't think they're an official, like a marathon thing, which is why then the expo was so poor. We did the 5K run on the Saturday, and for those that can see on
That's an impressive medal.
I like that medal, and the bobble hat or the beanie was in this sort of a design as well, so that was pretty cool. It's not every day you get to go. I think there was 15,000 runners at the 5K, and probably 70% were wearing the beanies, which I thought looked pretty cool. So that was
along as you run.
Yeah, sorry.
They all bobble along as you look.
Maybe that's why they're called bobble hats.
Yeah. So that was pretty cool. The marathon itself, once again, the course, the starting crowds, in my opinion, were very well organized. Once again, I don't know whether they look after us backpackers better, but toilets were right next door. We didn't have a big wait. By the time we got through the toilet line, we had still 5 minutes to get into our corral. We kicked off at 8:30, which I love that time.
Yeah.
Berlin was 10:30, so it's a little bit later in the day. 8:30 is just a great time to start. I found the course itself was once again flat. The crowds were good, although not as good as Berlin, I'll be honest. But there were parts along the course where, in US cities, they use gridding, like a steel grid on roads.
Yeah.
So some of the roads that we ran down had the steel grids, and then they'd put in this thin run of carpet for the runners to run on.
Yeah.
And I found that a bit odd, and I found that like there was congestion at some of those points.
So you couldn't run on the steel, or you could still run on the steel if you wanted to?
Oh, you could if you wanted to, but yeah, it was just weird. It was weird. So we ended up running on the steel and some of them because you just couldn't fit everyone on the carpet. So it was interesting. Aid stations were good, crowds were good, course was great. The only bit of an incline you get is as you're coming up into the finish line, and at 42 point something K. And while the gradient, you could probably walk or run that any day of the week after you've done 42K. It feels like Mount Everest. So, oh my God, there's finally a hill, Sharon and I just, the night before was really interesting because we both just looked at each other and said, I'm ready to go home. So, because we'd been away for like 3 weeks overall. And I think we just started on Sunday and just put our heads down. We didn't talk much at all. And all of a sudden, we're at the 24K mark. All of a sudden, we're at the 30K mark. And we're still just going. And all of a sudden, we look at our watch and we say, oh, my God, we're on here. So, we beat Berlin by 14 minutes. And that was we were really stoked with that. It wasn't pretty. We sort of started to die once we realized that we were close to really getting the mark that we wanted. I think we probably had a 5:30 in us. But we died a little bit once we realized we had a 5:30 coming up. But yeah, it was a great day. It was a really good. The medal is a nice medal. It's once again, I'm showing that for everyone, and finisher.
Definitely.
So plenty of medals. There was plenty of beer. You actually get a finisher beer. It's a commemorative can that they have to open for you. So you've got to. I'm still not sure of drinking a beer straight after a marathon, but it seems to work.
It worked well for me in Berlin.
And once again, we just had those post-race celebration thing with Travelling Fit up on the 22nd floor of the London house. And we had amazing views, and it was just nice. And we had one 6-star, which was Tracy McKay, and she was there in all her glory before she disappeared to go see Bonnie Raitt at Chicago Theatre. But yeah, it was just a really it was a more sedate crew, I think, than what we had in Berlin. But it was a good crew, and we just had a great day. And then we heard some of the heroics from the elites.
Yeah. Hey, before we get onto that, when we talked previously about Chicago, we talked about running through all these different areas, Little Italy, Little Caribbean, or whatever it was. Did you notice all those changes as you ran through those areas?
Probably not as much as what we should have. And I guess that's because Sharon and I were just focused and we had our head down. You could sense the music shifts. And there was a lot of music on the course. But there wasn't a lot of landmarks that stood out, I guess. You run past the United Stadium, the United Center, which is where the Chicago Bulls play, of course, and the Chicago Bulls are out, in their tent, and that's probably the one thing that stood out because, oh my God, there's the Chicago Bulls. But apart from that, the music shifted, but it's not like it's it wasn't evident that you were running through Little Italy if you didn't necessarily know that you were running through Little Italy. But 29 neighborhoods you run through. And I feel a bit like I didn't give that the full amount of credit that it deserves. But by the same token, we did a great we had a great marathon. One thing I will say, there's a guy, I've forgotten his name. I think his first name is Martinez. And he started a group. He got his story. He's created the slow AF running club. So he's a big unit, Martinez, really big unit. And one thing that I will say, he was at the expo, lovely guy, really genuinely just out there to run and as best he could. But during the course, there were a lot of his runners running they've got a turtle design shirt. It's just, they have done such a great job, and we met so many of their team. But what really impressed me about that community was the fact that Martinez was there as the support crew, and he had a crew of people that were making sure that, how they start packing up water stations, and he was making sure that his crew was still there to give drinks to, some of the slow AF runners coming through. So, and that's just beautiful. So well done to Martinez and that crew, because I just think that is just what running's all about. So
absolutely,
still
the same.
There was also the age group world championships as well. So was there an extra bit of hype about the race. Did you notice anything different being the World Championships for the age groups?
No, not really. And we, of course, knew Kim Tudjman was there for the World Age Champs, and she's a bundle of energy at the best of time, at the worst of times. So you can imagine what she was like while we were there. She was just full on, but she just runs. It wasn't necessarily part of what it wasn't forefront in her mind. She was just going out there to run. So, and that's just Kim's approach, I think.
Yep.
So there was a little bit of hype. There was a couple of stories on social media about some of the people in the World Age Champs, but at the end of the day, there was 2,700 runners in the World Age Champs, and out of a crew of I think finishes, there was 48,580 finishes in Chicago.
Yeah.
So which is huge, which is one of the biggest ones they've had for a long, long time. So part of that was 2,700 of the age champ. So there was a little bit of hype. They had their own tent. It was warm. There was some criticism around their bag check process, but I think generally it created a positive vibe, but it wasn't front of mind unless you're actually competing in it, I guess. So it was interesting. Sarah Katrina, who we've spoken to on the podcast, she was running it as her victory lap. She tweaked her hammy probably 2 weeks before. So she didn't have the best day out there on the course, but in true Sarah spirit, she finished strongly. So didn't get the time that she was wanting. She wanted to do a sub 4, but as she said, what that means is she's coming back next year. So she loves Chicago. So I think that's going to be a continued goal for Sarah. Yeah.
So I guess you were also in there at you were both Berlin and Chicago for 2 world records. So tell us about your world record that you got to witness or be part of.
When we saw, and I think just another thought, while you're running the marathon, you've got no idea what's happened in the elite races, right? So, and I think that maybe there's a way that people, because I think you'd fuel from that. If you're out there running and you know that Kipton's just run a world record and you're halfway through, that would give people a bit of a pick up in their step. So, but what I found amazing with Kipton, was that he dumped his paces at the 24K mark. He said, I'm just going to do this myself. And he just did it himself. And the only thing that worries me about Kelvin Kipton is that he said the marathon, it was only his third run ever in the marathon. And he said, the marathon still hasn't hurt me. He's never been hurt doing a marathon. So I don't know if he respects the 42.2 as much as what you potentially should
be, yeah.
Because he hasn't had to battle that pain. We saw Kipchoge in Boston, for example, tweak the leg strain, and he came through in 2:07, or I think it was, but he respects the 42.2, whereas I don't know if Kipton has that respect for it yet, because I'm not saying it's come easy, but he's just so focused and so good at what he's doing that he hasn't had to battle that yet. So that's why I'd love to see him in a race. It would just be...
And those bad runs that you have make you stronger for those really good runs. Whereas if he's only had those good runs and you haven't had those bad runs, it's a bit of a letdown when it does first happen when you're already top of the game.
There's still a lot of learning that comes out of all that.
Yeah.
But anyway, he ran it in 2 hours flat and 35 seconds, 2:00:35, which is, again, about 30-odd seconds, 40 seconds faster than the previous world record by Kipchoge. Second place was Benson Kipruto in 2:04:02. So he's beaten him by 3.5 minutes, which their pace is about 1.5 K. That's how far he won by. And third place, Tara, was our mate.
Bashir Abdi.
Bashir Abdi, our mate from Tokyo, who we met in Tokyo, who ran in 2 hours and 4 minutes and 32 seconds. So he was a full 4 minutes behind Kipton, which, is almost 2 kilometers away, which is just phenomenal when you look at it that way.
Yeah.
And
I,
Tony's
I,
sorry.
I saw a stat there. Someone was saying that for the average 400 meter pace that Kipton had for that was 68 seconds.
Yeah.
So if you remember back to your high school track events, I think maybe I went 74 seconds for a 400 meter, as fast as I possibly could. Kipton did that 108 times at 68 seconds, and like that's just mind blowing.
Yeah, it's phenomenal how fast those guys go. When you put a treadmill at 21 kilometers an hour, that's how fast they're running. And you can't even stand on it when it's going. You can't even run on it. It just off the end.
Yeah. And then of course we had the women, and my most favorite. I'm just in awe of this lady. I think she's got some choices to make as she moves, as she continues down her path. She excelled at the recent world champs in track. Probably could have done a little bit better if she hadn't fallen over in the 5,000. But Safan Hassan at 2:13:44 was the second fastest time ever in the women. So if she'd run that and Berlin hadn't have existed, it would be the world record.
Yeah.
And once again, I just look at this lady and think once she gets her racecraft in the marathons, because she backtracked there at a stage, she missed a drink station again, like we saw in London. She had to backtrack to get a drink. And she ran by herself pretty much from, I believe, from about the 24K mark. Once again, for at least from 30K, she was by herself. And I think she's a competitor. And I think that, I did the 5K splits between Elliot and Kipton, and I did the same for Asifa and Hassan. So it's really interesting when you look at these ones, because at the 5K, Asifa was at 15.59. Hassan was quicker at 15.43. At the 10K, Asifa was 31.45. Hassan was 31.05.
Whoa.
At the halfway mark, this is really interesting. Asifa was 106.2. Hassan was 105.48. So she's got a 40-second buffer at the halfway mark. At the 30K mark, Asifa was 134.12. Hassan was 134 flat. So Asifa had picked her up by the 30K. At the 40K, and this is where you saw Asifa, what she did in Berlin was phenomenal. But at the 40K mark, Asifa 205.13, and Hassan had noticeably slowed, and she was at 206.36. And hence then at the end, there was a 2-minute difference between the 2:11 that Asifa did and the 2:13. But once again, running by yourself, as Hassan did, and for so long, and having that little backtrack to get the drink.
Yep.
Yeah. The son didn't have a male pacer at all, did she?
She had one, I believe, but and there was another two that were in the pace pack from what I've read, but ultimately
they dropped away.
Yeah, they dropped away. So obviously didn't have the right one. So
that was another race with 47,000 runners. So another 47,000 people pushing her along. That's how I look at it.
The other thing with Hassan is most of the ladies run with a watch because they don't have a car in front of them necessarily with a timer. Like the men don't normally wear watches, or most of them don't, because they've got a car in front with the clock. The women typically don't, so they wear watches. Hassan doesn't wear a watch. She didn't wear one in London, and she didn't wear one in Chicago. So she's running based on feel, and as you say, based on racing. She's racing people, which is a bit different than the other girls in the race. So it's quite interesting.
Yeah. Well, considering they're only her 2 marathons that she's ever run as well, to go on feel is a really interesting way to do it when you're not a...
It is mind-boggling what these people are doing in their first and second marathons. It's just
they're track runners.
Yep, she's got some choices to make.
Do you stay track or do you go to marathons?
I read a story that after the 1500 meters final at the World Champs, she then decided that she hadn't done enough mileage, so she went out and did a long run to start getting her ready for Chicago. And I'm just going, can she keep it up? I'd love to see it, because I think she's changing the face of women's sport. And once again, we may see both of those, Asifa and Hassan, head to head at an Olympics. And I know my money would be on Hassan because she's just a competitor. So it'd be interesting. I know Tim's a big fan of Asifa, but mate, I think Hassan is just, she's almost naive in her approach on how good she really is. And that's just one of the things that I find absolutely endearing. So
she didn't have to stop and stretch at this marathon like she did in London.
Asifa still has 2 minutes on her at the moment.
She's also got a few more marathons up her sleeve. So
yeah.
So guys, we've done Berlin. Tony, you've done Chicago. What are we doing next?
Well, I got the bridge to Brisbane, so on Sunday. But the next marathon for us will be our 6-star, which is Tokyo in March 2024. So one more in 24, and then we are now on the 6-star portal as 5-star finishes. So that's always the day you get that email saying, hey, you've earned another star, is just one of my favorite days. So so we've got Tokyo coming up in 2024. So
wonderful. And Tim, what do we got coming up?
So we got GC50 in when is it, end of November, early December, which
Start of December.
25k race down the Gold Coast. It's a bit of a fun run, so we'll go down there.
Everyone does 25Ks for fun in summer.
Really, it's about prepping for next year, because we've got a big 2024. So it starts off in April. We're going to Boston, and we're going to be doing the Boston Marathon. So we've already been accepted into that one, again, through our friends at Travelling Fit. Thank you to the guys at Travelling Fit.
Yeah, my 18 minutes that I got at Berlin was not enough to qualify me for Boston.
And then we're still working out what we do in the middle of the year, but we'll likely do the Gold Coast double. We've started doing that now. We've done it the last couple of years, so we'll probably do that. And then that will feed into a big October, November, where we'll do Chicago, and then back it up with New York 3 weeks later, or 2 weeks later, or whatever it is. So it's going to be a big 2024 for us. So really a lot of that prep work starts now for us in a very minor way. We've come off Berlin. We've had a good couple of weeks break, and we'll just gradually get our bodies back into the routine of running again, and then build up some distance as we need to, very gradually through the summer, because it's a pain in the ass training through summer. But we'll get that foundation right that will keep us strong into the end of 2024.
So if anybody wants, I guess it's too late to sign up for Tokyo to watch Sharon and Tony get their 6 stars, unfortunately. But if anyone wants to come along and watch Tim and I get our 6 stars, Tony and Sharon are going to be there as their victory.
Terry Free's going
to be there. So there's going to be quite a few of us. Lucia's coming over.
The party after New York 2024 will be well worth getting there just for that.
Absolutely. So as per our last few episodes, we are now ending each episode with Tim's tip. What's your tip this week, Tim?
So all the hype's been around the super shoes, and do they make you a faster runner or not? And I guess my best advice for people is try not to fall for the marketing gumph that comes out around all this sort of stuff. A super shoe is not generally going to make you run faster. Might make you run a little bit faster, but at the end of the day, it's probably more important that you get the right shoe that fits your feet and get the right advice for yourself. So go to a proper running store to get the right shoe fitted to you. It may or may not be a super shoe. A lot of super shoes are more aimed at toe runners, and you may not be a toe runner. But get the right shoe that suits you, and you won't have injuries or problems with your feet later on.
Absolutely. Yeah. So thanks for joining us on this very special recap of the Berlin and Chicago marathons. In our next podcast episode, we'll be joined by our marathon mate, K Mass. So we met Kay and her husband Jed a couple of years back at the Australian Outback Marathon. Kay has run races all over the place, but especially loves to trail run. So we'll hear about her running journey, as well as some of the adventures that she's had along the way. We can't wait to bring her onto the show. She's a really lovely person. This ends our show tonight. We hope that you have enjoyed this episode of The Flying Runner. If you did enjoy this podcast, please listen and subscribe wherever you've listened or watched this episode. Video of this episode will be available at Spotify and YouTube, and audio will be on Amazon, Apple, and Google Podcasts, and most other popular podcast platforms. Remember, every step forward is a victory. Lace up, hit the road, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Until then, happy running.
Happy running.
Happy running.